most ridiculous rule your school ever had. When I was a junior in high school, they banned students from calling 911 without administrator approval. It started after a freshman had a seizure and another student called an ambulance. The school got stuck with a $5,000 bill because the kids' parents couldn't pay. Our principal announced the new policy during a morning assembly. Any student caught calling emergency services would face immediate suspension. We had to go through the nurse's office first, and she would decide if it was serious enough to notify administration. I didn't think much of it until 3 months later, when my best friend Olivia collapsed during cross-country practice. She had type 1 diabetes, and her blood sugar had dropped dangerously low. Our coach was at the other end of the track with another group. I reached for my phone, then hesitated, remembering the rule. I ran to get the nurse, but her office was locked. The secretary said she was in a meeting with administrators. When I explained it was an emergency, she just handed me a form to fill out. My hands were shaking as I wrote down Olivia's symptoms while precious minutes ticked by. 20 minutes later, they finally found the nurse. By then, Olivia's lips had turned blue. She wasn't responding when we called her name. The nurse checked her sugar levels and started panicking. She called the principal to get approval for an ambulance. He wasn't in his office. His secretary said he was at a district meeting across town. The nurse kept trying different numbers while Olivia got worse. I couldn't take it anymore. I pulled out my phone and dialed 911. The ambulance arrived within minutes. The paramedics said if we'd waited any longer, Olivia might have suffered permanent brain damage. They rushed her to the hospital where she spent 3 days in intensive care. The next morning, I was called into the principal's office. He had my suspension notice ready. 3 days for violating school policy. When I tried explaining what happened, he cut me off. Rules were rules, he said. Actions had consequences. That afternoon, Olivia's dad stormed into the school. He was a lawyer. He'd spent the night reading through state laws about duty of care and negligence. He threatened to sue not just the school, but every administrator personally if they enforced my suspension. The local news got wind of the story. They ran a segment about how the school's policy had nearly cost a student her life. Parents started calling the district, demanding answers. The school board called an emergency meeting. Our principal tried defending the policy. He talked about budget constraints and liability issues. Olivia's dad stood up and played the 911 call. Everyone heard my terrified voice begging for help while describing my friend's symptoms. The room went silent. The next day, the superintendent suspended the principal and scrapped the policy. They launched an investigation into other cost-saving measures that put students at risk. Turns out the principal had been cutting corners everywhere, from fire safety equipment to security cameras, all to stay under budget. Olivia came back to school 2 weeks later. The first thing she did was hug me in front of everyone. Her dad had filed a lawsuit anyway, not for money, but to force policy changes. The settlement required all schools in our district to have emergency medical training for staff and clear protocols for calling 911.